Think about how you treat my brother, she said, throwing my clothes onto the couch like I was some stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. My name is Daniel Rivera, 34 years old, and I work as a production manager at Midwest Manufacturing in Toledo, Ohio. That night, lying on my own couch with my clothes dumped beside me, I did exactly what my wife Lisa asked. I thought about how I treated Tyler. I thought about how I'd been covering his share of utilities for 7 months, how I'd watched our grocery bill nearly double without a single thank you, how he left dishes in the sink for days expecting me to clean them, how he borrowed my tools and never returned them, how he used my truck without asking, bringing it back with an empty gas tank. Tyler had been living with us since March, not visiting, living. My spare bedroom had become his permanent residence, complete with his gaming setup, his clothes scattered everywhere, and his attitude that we owed him something. The conversation that landed me on the couch had been simple enough. I'd sat down with Lisa and Tyler after dinner, pulled out our monthly budget, and explained that money was getting tight. My company had cut overtime hours, and Lisa's part-time nursing job wasn't covering the extra expenses Tyler brought. "We need to figure out a plan," I'd said, looking directly at Tyler. "Either you start contributing to utilities and groceries, or we need to discuss you finding your own place." Tyler had laughed. Actually laughed. "My own place? This is family, Daniel. You don't charge family." Lisa had jumped in immediately. "Daniel, that's completely unreasonable. Tyler is going through a rough patch." The rough patch had lasted 7 months. Tyler had been looking for work since he moved in, but somehow never quite found anything that met his standards. Too early, too far, not enough pay, wrong type of work, always an excuse. I'd watched our savings account shrink month by month, watched Lisa make excuses for behavior she'd never tolerate from anyone else, watched my own home become a place where I felt like an unwelcome guest. That night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger exactly, more like clarity. I'd been so focused on keeping the peace, on being the understanding husband, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have my own boundaries respected. Lisa's words echoed in my head. "Think about how you treat my brother." I had treated him like family. I'd given him a roof, food, and patience he didn't deserve, and somehow that made me the villain in this story. The house was quiet except for the sound of Tyler's television upstairs. My television, in my house, paid for with my money. I closed my eyes and started making a plan. Lisa and I had been married for 5 years. We'd bought this house together 3 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom ranch on the east side of Toledo. It wasn't much, but it was ours, or at least it had been. Tyler showed up in March, Lisa's younger brother, 27 years old and fresh off what she called a bad breakup. He'd been living with his girlfriend Sarah in Cleveland, working at a warehouse, but things went south with both the job and the relationship, and suddenly he needed a place to stay. "Just for a few weeks," Lisa had promised, "until he gets back on his feet." I'd agreed because that's what you do for family. You help when people need it. My own brother had crashed at my place years earlier when his wife kicked him out. The difference was, Miguel had found an apartment within 6 weeks and paid for groceries the entire time he stayed. Tyler was different. He moved in like he'd been invited to a permanent vacation. The first month, I'd figured he was still adjusting. By the 3rd month, I'd started dropping hints about job hunting. By the 6th month, I'd begun having direct conversations about timelines. Lisa always had an excuse ready. The job market was tough. Tyler was dealing with depression. He'd just started applying for this really promising position. He needed time to figure out his next step. Meanwhile, our electric bill had jumped from $120 a month to $190. Our grocery costs shot up from $180 a month to over $320. Tyler was home all day with the heat cranked and every electronic device running. Tools disappeared from my garage. The internet bill increased because Tyler needed a better gaming package. The breaking point conversations had started 2 months ago, small ones at first. Me mentioning to Lisa that maybe Tyler could help with the electric bill. Her explaining that he was family and I was being petty. Me suggesting he might contribute to household chores, her reminding me that he was going through a difficult time. Last month, I'd tried a different approach. I'd sat down with Tyler directly, man to man. explained that I wasn't trying to kick him out, but we needed to establish some ground rules about expenses and responsibilities. He'd nodded along, agreed completely, then changed nothing. 2 weeks ago, I discovered he'd been ordering takeout on our joint credit card. When I confronted him, he claimed Lisa said it was okay for emergencies. When I asked Lisa about it, she'd said I was overreacting to grocery money. But it wasn't grocery money. It was $180 worth of DoorDash orders in 1 week. Pizza, Chinese food, burgers. All because Tyler didn't want to cook the food we'd already bought. That's when I'd started noticing other things. How Lisa's tone changed whenever I brought up Tyler. How she'd started treating my concerns like character flaws. How she'd begun making me feel guilty for wanting basic respect in my own home. The warning signs had been there for months. I'd just been too busy trying to be the good guy to see them clearly. The realization hit me around 3 in the morning, lying on that couch with a thin blanket and a throw pillow that smelled like Tyler's cologne. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about chores or respect or even Tyler's freeloading. This was about the fact that my wife had chosen her brother over me, and I'd been too busy trying to fix things to see it. Lisa had thrown my clothes on the couch like I was a stranger who'd overstayed his welcome in my own house because I'd asked her brother to contribute financially or make other living arrangements. I thought about the last 7 months. Really thought about it. Every conversation where Lisa had dismissed my concerns, every time she'd made me feel selfish for wanting my own space back, every instance where she'd treated Tyler's comfort as more important than our marriage. The pattern was clear once I stopped making excuses for it. Lisa had made her choice long ago. She just never bothered to tell me. I sat up on the couch and looked around the living room. My furniture, my television, my house. But somehow I was the one sleeping on the couch because I'd suggested that a grown man should pay his own way. The anger came slowly, like a tide rolling in. Not the explosive kind that makes you slam doors and yell, the quiet kind that burns steady and changes everything. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee at 3:30 in the morning. Sat at the table where I'd tried to have that reasonable conversation about the budget just hours earlier. The table where Tyler had laughed at the idea of contributing to his own living expenses. That's when I understood what needed to happen. I wasn't going to fight about this anymore. I wasn't going to have another conversation about fairness or respect or boundaries. I wasn't going to try to convince Lisa that her husband's feelings mattered as much as her brother's convenience. I was done. The decision settled into my chest like something that had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. I wasn't angry at Lisa anymore. I wasn't frustrated with Tyler. I was just finished with a situation that had no solution as long as I was the only one trying to solve it. I finished my coffee and went back to the couch. But I didn't try to sleep. Instead, I started making a mental list of everything I needed to do. First, I'd call my boss and take a personal day. Then I'd start looking for a place to stay. Something temporary while I figured out the next steps. Somewhere I could think clearly without feeling like an intruder. The sun was coming up when I finally closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Lisa found me drinking coffee in the kitchen the next morning. She was already dressed for work, moving around like nothing had happened, like she hadn't banished her husband to the couch the night before. "You left the coffee maker on all night," she said, not looking at me. "I made fresh coffee at 3:30, she paused, finally meeting my eyes. "Daniel, about last night, I've been thinking about what you said, about Tyler." Her expression softened. She probably thought I was going to apologize. "Good," I said, "because I'm taking a personal day today. We need to have a real conversation about this situation." The softness disappeared. What kind of conversation? The kind where we figure out if this marriage is still working for both of us. Lisa set down her coffee mug hard enough to splash liquid onto the counter. "Are you seriously threatening divorce because I defended my brother? I'm not threatening anything. I'm trying to understand why asking a grown man to contribute to his own living expenses makes me the villain in this house. Because you knew he was going through a rough time when he moved in. You agreed to help him. For a few weeks, Lisa, it's been 7 months. He's not even looking for work anymore." She turned away from me, grabbing paper towels to clean up the spilled coffee. "He's been applying to places. The job market is terrible right now." "When was the last time he went on an interview?" Silence. When was the last time he even filled out an application? More silence. Lisa, he ordered $180 worth of food on our credit card last week. When I asked him about it, he said you told him it was okay. When I asked you, you said I was overreacting. It was for groceries. It was DoorDash orders. Pizza and Chinese food because he didn't want to cook the food we'd already bought. Lisa finished cleaning the counter and turned back to me. Her face had that set expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she'd already made up her mind and wasn't interested in hearing alternatives. Tyler is going through the worst time of his life. His girlfriend left him. He lost his job. He's struggling with depression. And instead of supporting him like family should, you're nickeling and diming him over utilities and takeout. I'm not nickeling and diming anyone. I'm asking for basic respect and responsibility. From someone who's barely holding it together. Lisa, he's not barely holding it together. He's playing video games 12 hours a day and ordering takeout on our credit card. That's not depression. That's taking advantage. Her voice went cold. So what are you saying, that we should kick him out? Put him on the street? I'm saying we should treat him like an adult who's capable of taking care of himself, with a timeline and expectations. You want me to choose between you and my brother? The words hung in the air between us. She'd said it like an accusation, but she was right. That's exactly what I wanted because that's exactly what the situation had become. Yeah, I said quietly, I guess I do. Lisa stared at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her purse and headed for the door. I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I expect you to have figured out how to be more supportive of my family. The door closed behind her with a sharp click. I sat there in the empty kitchen, listening to the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway. Then I heard Tyler's alarm clock going off upstairs, followed by the sound of him hitting snooze for the third time. I called my friend Jake, a guy I worked with who lived across town. Hey, can I crash at your place for a few days? I'll explain later. Sure, man. Everything okay? It will be. I spent the morning packing a bag and going through our financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, utility payments. I'd been tracking the numbers in my head for months, but seeing them laid out on paper made the situation crystal clear. Our monthly expenses had increased by about $250 since Tyler moved in, not just from an extra person in the house, but from someone who consumed resources like he was trying to set a record. But the real discovery came when I started digging deeper into our joint account activity. I noticed something strange. Lisa's personal savings account, the one she'd had before we got married, had been making regular transfers. Small amounts, 100 here, 150 there, going back about 4 months. I pulled up our online banking and looked closer. The transfers were always to Tyler's account, never to our joint expenses, never discussed with me. Just money flowing from my wife's personal savings to her brother's pocket. I sat back in my desk chair and stared at the computer screen. Tyler wasn't just not contributing to the household. Lisa had been giving him money, our family's money, without telling me. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about money being tight, how I'd been picking up extra shifts when I could find them, how I'd been putting off replacing my work boots because we needed to watch our spending, how I'd been feeling guilty about every small purchase while Lisa was secretly funding her brother's lifestyle. The phone rang. Lisa's name on the caller ID. I've been thinking about this morning, she said when I answered. I think we both said things we didn't mean. Did we? Daniel, I know this situation isn't ideal, but Tyler really is struggling, and he's family. I need you to understand that. How much money have you given him? Silence. Lisa, how much money have you given Tyler from your savings account? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm looking at our bank statements right now. Transfers from your personal account to his going back 4 months. More silence. Jesus Christ, Lisa, how much? It's not what you think. How much? Her voice was barely a whisper. Maybe $800 over the whole time. $800. On top of all the food, utilities, and everything else I'd been paying for. $800 she'd given to her brother while telling me we needed to tighten our belts. So you decided to help him with money without telling me. I knew you'd say no. You're damn right I would have said no because we're married, Lisa. We're supposed to make financial decisions together. I was trying to help my family. I thought I was your family too. The line went quiet, except for the sound of her breathing. I'll be home around 6, she said finally. We need to talk about this properly. She hung up before I could respond. I didn't wait until 6. I threw some clothes in a bag, grabbed my laptop and a few essentials, and drove to Jake's apartment. I'd figure out the rest later. Jake didn't ask too many questions when I showed up at his door with a duffel bag. Guest room's yours as long as you need it, he said. Beer's in the fridge. For the first time in months, I sat in a quiet living room without the sound of someone else's television upstairs. Without dishes in the sink that weren't mine. Without feeling like I was walking on eggshells in my own space. I turned off my phone and opened a beer. Tomorrow I'd start looking for an apartment. Tonight, I just wanted to remember what peace felt like. 3 days later, Lisa showed up at Jake's apartment. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway with red eyes and a desperate expression. She'd been crying probably for hours. Daniel, please, we need to talk. We can talk right here. Can I come in? No, she took a shaky breath. Tyler's gone. Good for Tyler. You don't understand. He left yesterday, packed his stuff, and disappeared. No note, no explanation. Just gone. I leaned against the door frame and waited for her to continue. I can't afford the house payments without your income. I called the mortgage company, and they said if I miss this month's payment, they'll start the default process. That's unfortunate. I know I messed up. I know I should have told you about the money, but we can fix this. We can work through it. How much money did you really give him, Lisa? The real number. Her voice cracked. About $800 total, like I said. I studied her face. And he just left? With all that support you'd been giving him? She nodded, tears starting again. He took the money I'd saved for next month's expenses, said he needed it for a security deposit on a place in Cleveland, but then he just disappeared. The irony was perfect. Tyler had finally shown Lisa exactly who he was, but only after she destroyed her marriage to protect him. I'm sorry that happened to you. Please, Daniel, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll make it up to you. Just come home. I am home. You know what I mean. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 5 years. She was asking me to fix a problem she'd created by lying to me and choosing her brother over our marriage. She wanted me to come back and rescue her from the consequences of her own decisions. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, Lisa. I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing this.
You made your choice when you threw my clothes on the couch for asking your brother to be a responsible adult. You made your choice when you started lying to me about money. And Tyler made his choice when he took your money and disappeared. She started crying harder. Please don't do this. Please don't leave me. I already left 3 days ago. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment near downtown Toledo. It had hardwood floors, a small kitchen, and a view of the Maumee River. It was quiet, clean, and mine. I'd also had a consultation with a divorce attorney. The house situation was complicated since both our names were on the mortgage, but my lawyer explained my options. Lisa would have to either refinance in her name alone, sell the house, or face foreclosure. Any of those outcomes would affect my credit score, but staying in a broken marriage would cost me more in the long run. I chose short-term financial pain over long-term misery. Lisa called every few days at first, then every few weeks. Always the same conversation. She was sorry. She'd learned her lesson. Tyler was out of the picture forever. But she never seemed to understand that the problem wasn't Tyler. The problem was that when her husband needed her support, she'd chosen someone else. 6 months later, I ran into Lisa's friend Jennifer at the grocery store. Hey, Daniel, how are you doing? Good, Jennifer, can't complain. She paused, clearly debating whether to bring up the obvious topic. I heard about you and Lisa. Yeah. For what it's worth, I never understood why she put up with Tyler's behavior for so long. Guy was always taking advantage of people. You hear from him lately? Jennifer shook her head. Not since he disappeared. Lisa tried to find him for a while, but he'd moved out of his friend's place in Cleveland. Word is he owes money to half the people he knows. The picture kept getting clearer. Even months later, Tyler hadn't just been taking advantage of Lisa and me.
He'd been working his way through friends and family, one generous person at a time.
How's Lisa doing? She had to sell the house last month. couldn't afford the payments on her own. She's renting a small place near the hospital now, working extra shifts to make ends meet. Jennifer looked uncomfortable. She asks about you sometimes, whether anyone's heard from you. I'm doing well, got my own place, picked up some freelance work on weekends. Life's good, and it was good, better than it had been in years. I'd learned to cook for myself again, made friends with my neighbors, started taking evening walks without wondering what crisis would be waiting for me when I got home. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I moved out. Lisa kept her retirement account, I kept mine. The house sold for just enough to pay off the mortgage and cover closing costs. We each walked away with about $3,000 and no shared debts. It could have been messier, but by then Lisa had accepted that Tyler's disappearance proved everything I'd been trying to tell her. She didn't fight the divorce, she just wanted it over. A year later, I was dating someone new. Sarah was a teacher, divorced herself, with 2 kids who visited every other weekend. She understood boundaries. She understood that kindness without limits isn't actually kind. She understood that helping family was different from enabling them. Lisa had lost her house, her brother, and her marriage because she'd chosen to enable someone who didn't deserve it. Tyler had burned through his welcome with everyone who'd tried to help him, leaving a trail of debt and broken trust. Me, I'd learned that sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. Some lessons cost more than others, but they're always worth it in the end. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.